Now that we're well on our way into year two of Marvel Now, I thought I'd take a look and tell you what I thought of some of their titles. So let's start where it all began. Uncanny Avengers is the first title to come under the banner, which started October 2012, spinning out of the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, a title I read peripherally but mean to sit down and actually slog through one of these days. The first arc of 4 issues is written by Rick Remender with art by John Cassaday. The underlying concept here is that Captain America, having taken Scott Summers' words during AVX to heart, who said something to the effect of, "What have you done for Xavier's dream?" aims to put together a group comprised of Avengers and X-Men that will be the face of human mutant relations now that it seems that M Day is reversed and mutants have been popping up across the world. He then proceeds to seemingly pick the entirely wrong people for the team and utterly fail. Okay, they barely keep it together during the first arc, but let's look at this dream team that are supposed to bridge the gap and bring peace between humans and mutants. First, you have Havoc, Alex Summers, the team leader who has experience from his days in X Factor, but one tiny little potential problem: he's Cyclops' brother. One might argue he'd be a bit biased to eventually having to hunt down Scott. Then you have the Scarlet Witch, who caused M Day. She swears she's changed and that she aims to make amends, but one could argue that a leopard doesn't change its spots. Rogue, who seems like a decent choice since she's been with the X-Men for a long time, but not only is she a former member of the Brotherhood, she's also a former lover of Magneto. Oh, who happens to be the Scarlet Witch's father? Thor, an odd choice considering he has no real ties to the mutant cause, but on the positive side, he's in good standing. Wolverine, it's funny, Cap tells Alex in the first issue that Wolverine wouldn't make a good leader simply because he's too much of a loose cannon and he's also got a school to run. Very good points, Cap. So why is he even on the team? Cap is right. He has a school to run. There's no valid reason for Logan to be here except, well, it's Wolverine, and he's got to be in every title. Cap himself finally rounds out the group, which, like Wolverine, leaves me pondering, doesn't Cap have other things to do? I would have said to Alex, here's a list of Avengers and X-Men to choose from, build your team, see me when you're ready, and going on to other things. I will say, from a reader's standpoint, this team makes for some obvious dramatics down the road, and I guess that's the point. Can these people get along? But really, haven't we seen this plenty of times in the past? It would be more refreshing to see a team that can actually work coherently. The main story of this arc is that the Red Skull has assembled his own team of genetically altered people who feel they've been wronged by mutants in the past, sort of a 21st century reverse. They attack and capture Rogue and the Scarlet Witch, steal the corpse of Charles Xavier, and somehow old Scully grafts Chuck's brain onto his, giving him Chuck's mental powers. From there, they take a day trip to New York to spread the word of anti mutant sentiment. We learn a little of the Skull's henchmen, but outside of attacking the group, they don't get much face time or fleshing out other than a few lines of dialogue. Hopefully, we'll get some more information of them down the line. People fight. In fact, issues 3 to 4 is pretty much a non-stop fight between various people, but everything seems spaced out pretty fairly. Scully gets away when Cap proves too strong minded to control, and everyone just barely survives. I get the feeling that Remender was trying to balance the book between zany and serious, similar to Jason Aaron's Wolverine in the X-Men title. He does a decent job, and John Cassaday turns in some really amazing artwork, though there are a few panels in each issue that look and probably were rushed. All in all, a decent start, even if they prove to be a team that implodes. I'm giving this a B plus. Written by Rick Remender with art by Olivier Coipel and Mark Morales, issue 5 is a standalone breather as Wonder Man, Wasp, and Sunfire join the ranks of misfits, and it's funny how some of the concerns I expressed with the first arc are mentioned in this issue. Exactly how are these people going to coexist as a team? I guess it's a question that only time can answer because nobody offers up a solution. I do like how Alex takes charge of the group, forcing Cap to take an uncommon back seat during the meeting. It proves he might have what it takes to lead. The Grim Reaper attacks during a news conference, but is seemingly and inadvertently killed when Rogue absorbs some of Wonder Man's energy and decks him a bit too hard. There's also a sub story about Kang kidnapping the Apocalypse twins, which will lead into the next arc. With the addition of three more people to the team, I'm hoping that Cap and Logan will take a back seat for most of the series since they have their own titles to be featured in. A fun issue with good art that helps flesh out the team members a little more. I'm giving this an A minus. The next story arc, Ragnarok Now, is still in progress as far as I know, so if that ever wraps up, I'll talk about it then. Onward to A plus X. This is an anthology series that pairs up an Avenger and an X-Men for a one-off self-contained story. Anthologies are somewhat of an anomaly in comics, mostly because they tend to be a hard sell to readers. When it was first announced, I didn't have much confidence in the series surviving long, but here it is a year later, and it's still plugging along. Granted, in the future, its format is changing a bit, becoming something more of like Marvel Comics Presents. I won't review every issue, but I will highlight a couple stories that I really like. The story of Kitty Pryde and Iron Man in issue 2 was fun. I like how they interact. The Thing and Gambit pull one over on the Yancey Street Gang in an amusing little ditty in issue 6. Hawkeye and Deadpool have zany fun in issue 8. Really, none of the stories were terrible, but these stood out for me. A quirky series that tends to be a mixed bag. I'm giving this a B minus. I'm convinced that the writers of Marvel are all trying to outdo each other with crazy ideas for their comics. All New X-Men is no exception. Written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Stuart Immonen for the first 5 issues, this series explores the ramifications of Scott Summers rescuing emerging mutants to join his new Charles Xavier school. By rescuing, I mean making a spectacle of the group and stealing away with said new mutants. Granted, at the time Scott and crew intervene, they are in danger, but it still feels like he's making a big show of it. Hank McCoy is displeased with this, and after learning that he's dying from his continued mutation, does something drastic and equally stupid. He goes back in time and brings the original Teenage Mutants to the present. He's hoping that old Scott will be shocked by the young team and realize how far he's fallen from Xavier's ideals and stop the insanity. Well, they do a good job of rattling Scott's cage and manage to temporarily stop him from bringing another mutant into his group, though later he convinces the kid to join in at a less conspicuous time. Scott's become a funny kind of character. His ideals are becoming more and more violent, almost akin to Magneto on a lesser level, and a lot like his son's Nathan, aka Cable. I'm surprised that Scott hasn't sought out Nathan to join the fold, but then Cable's busy with his own group. More on that later. It's almost like Scott has given up on trying to bring a peace between mutants and humans. We get a little slice of backstory for the New Mutants, but all they've really done as of issue 4 is stand around in a couple panels, talk to each other, and wait for who knows what from Scott. By the way, Scott and crew have set up residence at the Weapon X facility where Wolverine was experimented on because, as Scott puts it, it's the last place people would look. By the end of issue 5, the young X group have decided to stay in the future for now, with Kitty Pryde playing chaperone until they can both save Hank McCoy and convince old Scott of his folly. The title is also something of a misnomer. The all new X Men are actually the original X Men, since I assume they're to be the focus of the comic for the most part. So I have to wonder, apart from being in the future, what's so all new about them? I also can't foresee how long this title can go on before the concept wears thin. I mean, at some point, the young X Men have to go back to the past. And since they're the focus of the book, what happens then? Does the book end? Do we switch gears and focus on some other people? The idea seems like something more in tune with a limited series. That said, this first arc is pretty good. Brian does a decent job of juggling plots, even if it seems he's yet again throwing up a few too many balls and a couple might eventually get dropped. I'd say as long as he doesn't try to introduce any new mutants into the book and continues to split the focus between the young X group and Scott's team, it'll all work out. I'm giving this a B. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to do some more of these in the near future. So keep your eyes open. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe.